have read on Crop Watch a couple of weeks ago about the threat of Goss's wilt. With corn continuing to rapidly advance, in some fields, Goss's wilt is affecting the crop in varying stages of growth. UNL Extension plant pathologist Tamra Jackson-Ziems says producers should be aware the disease is emerging earlier than normal.
I wanted to give everybody an update to tell them kind of what we're seeing, and we are seeing Goss's wilt showing up in samples that have been submitted to the Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic, and these samples are coming from all over the state and counties from anywhere in the eastern half of the state.
More varying this year then?
Well, we're seeing it showing up in fields of varying crop stages, and so what's different is that it seems to be showing up a little earlier than we've seen it in the past, and it's causing some alarm for some producers.
Now, what you're seeing right now, is it widespread across the state, and is it widespread across every field?
Well, I definitely want to talk about this. It's not in every field. There are some fields that are at higher risk, and those are particularly the ones where we're seeing disease, and especially those that have had a history of not only the disease, but are corn on corn and may have some sensitive hybrids out there too.
Let's talk about scouting. What should producers be looking for in the field, every field, and how many plants should they be scouting?
I want to remind everyone, and our observations is the disease is not always evident from the road. We've got to take a walk out into the field and look at quite a few plants to really get an idea of what's going on out there. And so there's a few symptoms they can look for to diagnose the disease. And so in particular, we look for the dark green to black freckles on the edges of big lesions. And those are pretty common right now. What is unusual for us this year is we're also seeing systemic wilt in some of the plants, and that's a more severe phase of the disease that really hasn't been common on the eastern side of the state.
Any idea of why it's more common now?
Well, we're not exactly sure, and so that's something they won't really know they have until they get out there. And so you might notice plants that are very heavily affected by some of these lesions, and when they cut those plants off and look at the ends of the stems, they might notice some discolored vascular bundles inside, and that's an indication that the disease is systemic. Many of those plants will not survive.
What's your recommendation on how many plants you should look for in the field? How in depth you should go?
Well, I specifically would want them to look at locations where they think they've had it in that field in the past, and so I would make a zigzag pattern across the field as they scout it, or as their crop consultant is, to try to hit the vast majority of the different environmental parts of that field.
Time frame for scouting? Are we looking at now and 2 weeks from now? What are we looking at in terms of time frame?
Well, I would gauge that based on some of these locations. So for instance, some of these fields were hailed within the last 4 weeks, and we're seeing the most severe symptoms showing up where we had some of that major hail damage. Now is a good time to scout some of those fields, but as we move forward into the summer, be mindful of the severe weather and the impacts on injury in those plants, and judge accordingly.
Let's talk about treatment. What options are out there?
Well, we have the best results from our trials looking at resistant hybrids. Well, we've had consistent results from resistant hybrids. Unfortunately, though, during the season we have fewer options and fewer research results. And so we do have some results from, say, one bactericide called Goss, and I shared some of those results from a single year's worth of research back 2 weeks ago in a Crop Watch article that I hope people will take a look at. But at this point, we don't have a lot of results telling us that we're going to get a lot of benefits and that we will be able to stop the disease.
So at this point, spraying is not necessarily effective or not effective, there's just not enough numbers to show it?
Absolutely, and we do have other products coming along, and we've included all of these products in a trial that we're doing right now. We just don't have results to share yet.
You mentioned planting resistant varieties. Is there anything to be said about rotating or not rotating and how effective that could be?
Absolutely. Crop rotation can help reduce the amount of inoculum in a field. You won't necessarily eliminate disease though. And so we know even in corn following soybeans that have been injured by hail, we've seen significant disease development. But crop rotation is always a good idea to manage this and other pest problems.